This house, it's been transferred to our eldest son and his wife. Strangers should leave immediately. Despite the fact that I was bearing the burden of the house mortgage, I received shocking statements from my in-laws and husband. From the beginning, they had been using me with the intent to make me pay off the mortgage. When I learned this truth, my heart rapidly shifted from gratitude to anger. "Well then, I'll be moving out." To their mocking words, I responded with a defiant smile. "I will make them regret ever challenging me." Immediately, I sought help from an acquaintance and began plotting my revenge against them. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm a 48-year-old lawyer working at a law firm. Currently, I'm living while taking care of my husband and his parents. It all started when I gave a house to my in-laws. I married James when I was 30. When our marriage was decided, my father-in-law was involved in an accident and injured his leg. He couldn't stand on his own and had to live in a wheelchair. My mother-in-law was also elderly and needed care, so I gave them a barrier-free house. Initially, we considered living in public housing, but then we decided to move them to a location midway between my husband's workplace and mine. This was my suggestion so we could reach them quickly in case of any emergency. I received a lot of help from the Anderson family regarding my father. "Please let me return the favor," I said. My father passed away before I got married. Just before he died, he had accumulated a lot of debt, putting our family finances in a very tight spot. We struggled, piling up more debt to pay off the existing ones. My husband and his family were the ones who saved us from this difficult situation. James and his parents paid off my father's debts on our behalf. If you're hesitating to marry because of the debt, wouldn't it be solved if we paid it off? My parents think the same way, said James. That's right. It's debt from a business failure, not from frivolous spending. There's every reason to help, added my mother-in-law. That's right. We should help each other out in tough times. There's nothing to be ashamed of, said my father-in-law. Thus, they supported most of the debt without saying anything. Both my father and I expressed our gratitude through tears, and I desperately took the bar exam. The total amount borrowed from my husband's family was about $50,000. I was confident that I could repay the debt once I succeeded as a lawyer. I didn't want to carry the debt as a perpetual burden. My ultimate goal was to pass the bar exam and become a lawyer. With a firm vow to repay the money I borrowed from my in-laws, I continued to work hard to become a lawyer. With that strong determination, I immersed myself in studies and, as a result of tremendous effort, finally passed the bar exam. My father and in-laws celebrated my success, and my heart was filled with immense joy. To start my career in the legal field, I quickly found a job and began working at a law firm. The director was very kind, and I learned a lot from experienced senior lawyers, gradually honing my skills. Over time, I acquired exclusive clients and now hold an important position in the office as a female lawyer earning over $100,000 a year. Thanks to my professional success, I was able to completely repay the debt to my father and in-laws. However, after my mother passed away, my father soon left this world too, and I was left alone. That's when James proposed to me. "You're a strong woman who can stand on your own. But I want to be the man who supports you. I will always cherish you, so please consider marrying me." Convinced by his words, we decided to marry, expecting a happy life to begin. At that time, my father-in-law was unfortunately involved in an accident. Grateful for their past kindness, I offered to build a new barrier-free house for them, despite their objections. The gratitude I feel is more than words can express. Please, do not hesitate. I want you all to live comfortably. It was a sincere wish. I conveyed my earnest feelings, not just flattery. My enthusiasm reached them, and with a wry smile, my in-laws accepted my offer. However, right after agreeing, they added a condition. Michelle, why don't you live with us too? We heard you and your husband are looking for a new house. That's right. If you don't mind, let's live together. Eventually, this house will belong to you. James has an older brother. He, 3 years older than me, got married and left home a few years ago. He started his own business and, due to his business, left everything at home to James, as I heard from my mother-in-law. My brother-in-law had an oral agreement that in exchange for taking care of the aging parents, James could freely use the parents' assets. Before leaving home, my brother-in-law had communicated this to James. Moving to the new house would shorten my commute, and we would start living together with James and his parents. Since we could support each other in times of need, there was no reason to refuse living together. However, I was worried that I might trouble my in-laws. Having occasionally caused them trouble even before marriage, I was anxious about whether living together was appropriate. Sensing my concerns, James gently placed his hand on my shoulder and reassured me. Don't worry, Michelle. I'm here to support you. Let's live together with confidence. Encouraged by James' words, I agreed to live with my in-laws. I was expecting to start a new life with the four of us and have enjoyable days. However, the peaceful life I had hoped for was not the reality. Michelle, where did you put my morning clothes? Michelle, the TV remote isn't responding. Can you do something about it? Michelle, can you help me? I want to sit on the sofa. It has already been 13 years since we started living in this house. In this house, every family member always comes to me for favors. They have no intention of managing things on their own. The family is completely dependent on me for everything, especially my father-in-law, who is disabled. He doesn't hesitate to touch me freely. I told you I had prepared and hung up the morning clothes. Mother, that's the air conditioner remote, not the TV remote. It's on the desk. Father, please ask James for physical support when he's around. Please don't rely on me. I can't support you properly. I found myself replying to them daily. Initially, I suppressed my dissatisfaction and did my best to meet the family's demands. It was unthinkable that while shouldering the mortgage, all household responsibilities were also left to me. I had thought about divorce several times. However, James always skillfully managed the situation, and my in-laws would apologize. I wasn't feeling tortured or harassed, so every time they apologized, my heart wavered and I ended up choosing not to divorce. Day-to-day life was filled with the in-laws' dependence and minor frustrations. But somewhere, I felt a bond as a family, which might have made me tolerate the situation. Still, the option of divorce always flickered in my mind. My mother-in-law finally started showing signs of mild dementia, or perhaps she was just becoming forgetful. It's not clear, but such questions from her increased. James, who had promised to help before marriage, proved to be utterly unreliable in this situation. Continuing my life with these uncertainties, I gradually adapted to the environment through experience. I began to handle everything before being told and started to express my opinions clearly to James and others. However, my father-in-law's excessive behavior was something I could not overlook. I expressed my dissatisfaction not only to James but also to my mother-in-law. I can't overlook father's behavior. Lately, he pretends to have dementia to touch me. Mother, please do something. My father-in-law has not yet been diagnosed with dementia. To be precise, he was examined, but he wasn't clearly diagnosed with dementia. The symptoms were mild, so it was a gray area whether it's dementia or not, the doctor said. Don't say that. It's part of the illness. It can't be helped. Certainly, such behavior could occur in dementia tendencies. But normally, this happens at a more severe stage of the symptoms. Regarding my father-in-law's behavior, he was just using the word dementia as a shield to act freely. Even after the doctor said it's not dementia, my in-laws arbitrarily decided it's dementia and used it to excuse inconvenient situations. I could understand if it was really dementia, but using an illness to force others to endure is not acceptable. I consulted with James and sought a response from my in-laws. But each time, he said it was troublesome and kept postponing it. When I was about to reach my limit of patience, an unexpected event occurred. This month, the repayment is completed. I'll be freed from this suffering. On a holiday afternoon, I was organizing the household account book and my diary. Looking at the bank book, I noticed something and my face brightened. At the end of that month, the mortgage repayment for my in-laws' house would finally be completed. Filled with a sense of achievement, I felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Thinking that my burden would decrease and I would have more money to spend freely made me very happy. However, at that point, I didn't know yet that the real trial was about to begin. One evening, during a family dinner, James suddenly started talking about the mortgage being paid off. "Michelle, the mortgage for this house is going to be paid off completely this month, right?" he asked. Since he had never brought up the mortgage before, I was a bit taken aback by his sudden question. However, he poured beer into a glass from a bottle with a friendly smile. "Yes, that's right, but why all of a sudden?" I replied. "Because we have to celebrate, right? You've had a hard time, Michelle. I want to celebrate grandly as a thank you," James said. I couldn't hide my surprise at his unexpected words. I was touched that James had thought that way and understood my burden. Thinking, if only he helped a little more with the housework, I felt grateful that he cared about me. His words instantly erased my frustrations, and a smile of joy spread across my face. "James, thank you. Can I look forward to the celebration?" I asked. "Of course. We'll discuss it as a family and prepare." "Just wait, Michelle," James replied. Relieved by his words, I looked forward to the celebration preparations. But this happy feeling didn't last long, and soon I was faced with the harsh reality. I accepted James's invitation without suspicion. It seemed that my in-laws had also heard about the talk and were preparing something together. A few weeks later, I was called in by James and my in-laws. Work had calmed down at that time, and I was in good spirits, so it was a perfect occasion for celebration. "Sorry for the sudden call. I have something to talk about." "It's okay, no problem at all. Today, we, as a family, have an important matter to discuss with you, Michelle." "What's the matter?" I thought it was about the celebration, but why make it sound so serious? Wishing they would just talk normally, I decided to listen to what they had to say. "Actually, now that the mortgage repayment is ending, we want you to leave here," they said. "What?" I couldn't help but let out a surprised voice at this unexpected statement. They wanted me to leave the house as soon as the mortgage was paid off? What was I being told? Was it a misunderstanding? Such surprising words made me want to think it was a misunderstanding. I couldn't fully comprehend what James was saying and lost my words, unable to respond to his query. At that moment, I couldn't catch up with my thoughts and was just confused. Seeing me like that, my in-laws couldn't wait for me to understand the situation and began to explain further. "We've sold this house to our eldest son and his wife," my father-in-law informed me. "What?" I exclaimed in shock. My mind was in turmoil, unable to comprehend what was happening. Being suddenly ordered to leave the house, and furthermore, that the house had been passed to James's eldest brother and his wife, was unbelievable. What was the meaning of all I had done for this family? Did this situation signify that my role was over? However, I could not accept such an unfair and unreasonable situation. Now that we have this wonderful house, your role here is no longer needed. We tolerated you until the mortgage was paid off, but now the house is ours. You are no longer needed, my mother-in-law continued. I had lived in this house with James's family, feeling deep gratitude towards them. Because I felt so grateful, I stayed without saying anything until today. But now, I realized it was all just an act. Even helping my father and me was part of their plan to make me do something for them. Facing this truth, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and disappointment. The sudden estrangement from a family I trusted was an immeasurable mental blow to me. The trust I had built up over the years crumbled in an instant. It was as if everything I had believed in for so long was just an illusion, deeply wounding my heart. They knew I was striving to become a lawyer to clear my father's debts, so they gambled, thinking the investment, though risky, could potentially double in return. It was a scheme to make me buy the house. We expected a significant return if we showed you kindness. Ever since you and James were dating, we thought the investment wouldn't be a waste, she added. When you were happy just for us taking a little care of your father and gave us expensive wine as a way to thank us. We thought you were easy, she continued. It was before my father's business collapsed. My family was quite wealthy until then. James seemed to have been eyeing my family's wealth from the beginning, knowing I was aspiring to be a lawyer. That's why he saw value in his actions up to this point. Unaware, I completely trusted James and his family. How foolish I was. I couldn't believe myself. That's why we devised this plan. We thought if we obligated your father, we might get a big reward, he said. Their confident and unbelievable statements were hard for me to accept. So, it's a great success. We've got a wonderful new house. It's in our name, and once the mortgage is paid off, everything is ours. What we do with our property is none of your business, they declared. Their words were filled with planning and conviction, and I struggled to accept this reality. It took me time to understand that everything had been planned from the beginning. For these 13 years, they had just been quietly waiting for this moment. They never truly loved me or my father. We were just a means to their end. Their plan had been to approach our family from the start, and we fell into their trap without realizing it. Faced with this unbelievable situation, darkness spread in my heart. My emotions sank into deep darkness, as if I was standing on the edge of a cliff. The word despair suited my feelings at that moment. I couldn't understand everything they had done, thought, and executed. So, outsiders should leave this house immediately. You have no place here anymore. Their words inflicted a deeper wound in my heart. Confronted with the fact that I was no longer needed in this house, I was just dumbfounded. This house was once a place of peace, love, and warmth for me, but now all that had crumbled away. A chapter of my life had ended, and a new, lonely journey was about to begin. There's your stuff to pack, so it can't be immediate, James. If you do that, you'll really be in trouble. Let's do it tomorrow. I'll give you until tomorrow to pack your things properly and leave, my mother-in-law declared. This house now belongs to the Anderson family, my father-in-law added. Also, I'll get the divorce settled. There's no point in us being a couple anymore, and I'm tired of your nagging. Make sure you've signed the papers by the time you leave this house tomorrow, James said. The words Anderson family weighed heavily on my heart. It was now clear that I had never been accepted by the Anderson family from the beginning. Was I treated unjustly and made to work like a slave, struggling to balance housework and my job because I wasn't considered family? All my questions merged into one, and I could only muster a bitter smile. I was deceived by your family from the start, I murmured. That's right. Are you stupid? Don't you understand that? James retorted. Hearing his words, I felt something breaking inside me. Looking down, I slowly raised my face and, forcing a smile, gave an unexpected response to my in-laws. Then, I will move out. My heart could no longer find a reason to stay with the Anderson family. All those days were filled with their deceit. My life from now on would be a new path. When I suddenly showed a bright face and decided to leave the house lightly, my in-laws could not hide their surprised expressions. Quite obedient, aren't you? Got something up your sleeve? My mother-in-law asked suspiciously. No plans. Hearing such an incomprehensible story, I felt like my life hit rock bottom. And just like that, my love for your family cooled instantly. I'll pack up my things right away and leave this place. I'll properly sign the divorce papers. I'll have my lawyer contact you later about the division of property. Goodbye, and thank you for everything up to now, I said. Without waiting for my in-law's reaction, I returned to my room. As I packed my belongings, I held back my tears while planning my next steps. After such terrible treatment, I couldn't just let it end silently. I wouldn't be at peace until they experienced the same pain, suffering, and unfairness I had endured. While packing, I calmly thought of ways to get back at them. I meticulously planned how to inflict the greatest pain on them. Various thoughts raced through my mind as I deeply contemplated my future actions. My anger and disappointment towards the in-laws were indescribable, but I maintained my composure, searching for the best way to resolve the situation. My revenge on them had to be more than just an emotional reaction. They needed to seriously understand the consequences of their actions. My new life began from there. While I was packing, suddenly my phone rang. The moment I saw the caller's name, a strategy formed in my mind. Surely this person will support me, I thought, and, without hesitation, answered the call, revealing the harsh situation I was facing. The caller listened attentively to my story, and then we discussed and promptly acted on a plan for the future. Once I finished packing, I quietly left the house I had lived in for years without a word to James and his family. When I left, I decided to sever all ties with them. So, I deleted their contacts from my phone. Determined not to respond to any communication from them, my decision soon started showing results. The day after I left the house, I received numerous intense calls from my in-laws. I had deleted the numbers, but remembered them due to our long association, which weighed heavily on my mind that morning. They must have realized that I had left the house and understood what had happened. However, I had no intention of responding to their calls anymore. As I looked at my phone, I indulged in a sense of superiority over my decision and smiled lightly. At that moment, the person who provided me a new place to live reassured me, "You don't have to answer the phone at all." I gratefully nodded at his words. I was ready to take the first step towards a new beginning. My life was about to enter a new chapter in a new environment. After the calls from my mother-in-law stopped, James started calling. His calls were like unbearable noise to me then. Unable to tolerate it any longer, I turned off my phone and, without turning it back on, proceeded with canceling the service. This action was a clear statement of ending my relationship with James. 3 months passed, and I had started a new life in a new apartment. Freed from the stress of living with my in-laws, I could focus more on my work. My daily life became more fulfilling, and I enjoyed my life to the fullest, free from past restraints. People around me noticed that I was shining. Post-divorce, my face became brighter with smiles, and my personality turned more cheerful and friendly. This change was recognized by others, and I received many compliments. Though previously oppressed mentally by my relationship with my in-laws, I decided to cherish my relationships with colleagues at work and build good connections. I plan to put more effort into my job and prioritize communication with my coworkers. When I made this resolution, the receptionist at my office appeared on the floor in a panicked state and urgently reported to me. "Miss Cohen, there's a parent and child at the reception looking for you," she said. Cohen was my maiden name, which I still use after the divorce. Hearing her report, I rushed to the reception to understand what was happening. The normally polite and composed receptionist's agitation indicated something unusual was going on. Something significant must have caused her distress. Seeing her worried expression, I wanted to be of support, and a male colleague, sensing her state, offered to accompany me. We headed together to the lobby. Arriving there, my expression changed dramatically when I saw who was there. I found her. "Mom, there's Michelle." When I heard that voice, I saw my mother-in-law and James. They were raising their voices inside the office, saying, "Michelle, how could you do this? Cutting off contact is terrible. Do you understand the trouble we're in?" I was stunned by their irrational behavior and couldn't help but question it. Others present couldn't hide their dismay at their actions. Their appearances, worn and filled with anger, were stark after not seeing them for months. Realizing the abnormal situation, other reception staff reported to the upper management, and soon the office manager appeared in the lobby. "Miss Cohen, a meeting room is prepared. How about having a discussion there with your in-laws?" "I'll contact him," the manager suggested calmly. Having already confided everything to the manager, I accepted the suggestion. Feeling uneasy about going alone, I took my colleague with me. He was the lawyer I had hired for the matter with James, so they accepted his presence. I headed to the meeting room, suppressing my confusion and agitation. Despite my turmoil and anxiety about the unknown situation ahead, I was somewhat relieved by the manager's calm handling and resolved to move forward step by step. As I walked to the meeting room, my mother-in-law and James glared at me with anger. Despite their dire situation, they seemed displeased to see me enjoying my work. Their gaze and attitude made their feelings clear. Sitting in front of my in-laws, we exchanged glares, and then the manager entered the meeting room with someone else. "Sorry I'm late." "What? Why are you here?" The person the manager brought was James' brother, my brother-in-law. He stood there, glaring at the two with an angry expression. "There's nothing to say. You guys have really done something ridiculous." My brother-in-law was a former gang leader who used to rule this area in his youth. He now runs his own company, working in construction. His employees affectionately call him boss, and he detests dishonest behavior. After consulting with him about this incident, he was visibly angered. When I lost my place to live, he had taken care of me for several weeks in a women's dormitory. He was already aware of the house situation with my in-laws. Informed about the details, he immediately offered his help. Why didn't he know? When my in-laws told me to leave the house, they said they had sold it to their eldest son and his wife. I found out everything from Susan and confirmed it. "You didn't think you could do such a horrible thing to Michelle and get away with it, did you?" As soon as the name Susan was mentioned, James and his mother showed expressions of astonishment. Susan was his wife and the mastermind behind this incident. As the wife of the eldest son, she had always harbored hostility towards me for some reason. She had been a housewife, following my brother-in-law's wishes, up to this point. However, it wasn't my brother-in-law's instruction but her own will. Women were seen as the guardians of the home, and her parents had lived that way, so housekeeping was deemed natural for her. Based on such notions, she seemed to believe that women who went against this belief were not real women. However, when I appeared, how did she view me? My attitude of actively engaging in work for nearly 40 years might have been too dazzling for her. Moreover, Susan was not good at cooking. Even my brother-in-law and father-in-law had asked my mother-in-law to teach her, and I had heard about this from James. On the other hand, I could handle household chores normally. Furthermore, I managed housework better than Susan while juggling my job. She might have been envious of my ability to do everything. Every time Susan met me, she started making snide remarks. She accused me of neglecting household chores or leaving them to my husband, throwing various harsh words at me for decades. However, my brother-in-law always intervened. That might have been another source of dissatisfaction for Susan. My brother-in-law said it was fine for Susan to work, and he helped around the house. Her inaction in this situation was her own choice. It was unfair for her to take out her frustrations on others. When my brother-in-law warned Susan, she began targeting her discontent at me. Susan confessed that she orchestrated the entire plan to take over the house and make me buy it. She instigated you, Mom and Dad, to execute this scheme. You all probably thought you could get your own house and continue pretending to be senile, and I wouldn't be able to complain. Unable to contact my brother-in-law because of Susan, they had their ways to orchestrate the entire scheme. James had also accepted a reward for helping them in this affair, making them all conspirators. The only person who didn't know was my brother-in-law, who would have stopped such foolish actions had he been aware. This situation must have filled him with regret. So that's why everyone behaved so meekly whenever he visited. Whenever my brother-in-law came over, my parents-in-law didn't do anything. They probably understood what the outcome would be if he found out about the situation. The manager and colleagues present watched my in-laws with expressions of astonishment. So, how should we handle this? I have no intention of forgiving even a fraction of the insult I received, let alone the trouble caused to Michelle. But, it was Susan's suggestion. That's right. We were just misled by clever words. It wasn't intentional. Not intentional. You say? At James's statement, my patience reached its limit. I stood up, my face filled with anger, and yelled at my mother-in-law and James. How can you say you had no ill intentions after doing such a thing? Do you have any idea how much pain I've been through these 13 years? My suppressed emotions exploded, and I couldn't hold back my tears of anger and frustration. My mother-in-law and James had never seen me cry before. No matter the hardship, I had endured and persevered. Even when my father-in-law was falsely considered senile and acted freely, I never showed any tears and endured everything. In their eyes, I was always a strong woman who never cried. Seeing me raise my voice and cry then must have been shocking for them. Do you realize how grateful I was to you? How much I wanted to repay you? To think that the care for my father was motivated by such ulterior motives. I can forgive you. I will never forgive you. With those words as a signal, my brother-in-law brought someone into the meeting room, and a man in a black suit entered. He sat opposite us and looked intently at my in-laws. You will have to take responsibility for this. What? Faced with an incomprehensible turn of events, my mother-in-law exclaimed in surprise. This man is my lawyer, hired by brother-in-law. He is a respected attorney in our office, like a mentor to me. We intend to seek compensation for the unfair treatment I've received. What do you mean? It's pointless to dig up the past now. The past is irrelevant now. The lawyer, who had been quietly listening to my in-laws, slightly adjusted his glasses and coolly refuted them. The current evidence and the basis for the future claim of damages make the lawsuit fully feasible, especially since there was no agreement not to claim property at the time of the divorce. In this case, there is no specific time limit for claiming compensation. Furthermore, as he spoke, the lawyer took out an SSD from his pocket, and my in-laws looked confused. "What is that?" "This is the record Michelle has been keeping. Her PC was equipped with a camera for remote meetings, and all your heinous acts have been saved as data." Upon learning this truth, my in-laws' expressions rapidly paled. "Michelle mostly worked in the living room, didn't she? Modern laptops often have built-in cameras, and your harassment in the living room has backfired," the lawyer said before pocketing the SSD and calmly staring at my in-laws. "The ownership of the house is already in Michelle's name, and your eviction is just a matter of time. We will proceed with legal action promptly, so please prepare the funds." "Wait, you're saying it's changed to her name?" James reflexively reacted to the lawyer's statement. My brother-in-law raised his voice in response to James's reaction. "I asked Michelle to change the ownership to her name. Thanks to you putting it in Susan's name without permission, the change was surprisingly easy. Anything to say about that?" My brother-in-law taunted James with a mischievous smile. James, who had never won a fight against his brother since childhood, couldn't argue back, and my mother-in-law also remained silent. "I will also properly bill you for all the expenses involved in that transfer. That's only fair, right? After all, it was your wrongful actions. If you don't deal with what you've started, we'll be in trouble too," said my brother-in-law, folding his arms and standing imposingly, throwing those stern words at them. The two were speechless before my brother-in-law's stern demeanor. My brother-in-law had also informed Susan, his wife and the mastermind behind this ordeal, about this. After resolving this matter, he had expressed his intention to divorce her over the phone. "I'm really sorry for involving you in this, Michelle. Even though I didn't know, I will support you to the fullest until you are satisfied. Let me know any request you have. It's my family who did this, so I have a responsibility too." If it hadn't been for my brother-in-law's call that day, I might still be suffering. If my brother-in-law hadn't been part of the family and there for me, maybe I wouldn't have been able to recover. I never realized how important it is to have support. Grateful for my brother-in-law's kindness and warmth, I glared at the two and threw decisive words at them. "I will never forgive you for using my and my father's feelings and exploiting them for your own benefit. No matter how much you try to compensate, I will not forgive you. If you ever step foot in my office again, I will call the police. From now on, I will leave all responses to my representative. Never appear in front of me again." The manager and my colleagues listened as witnesses until the end, so my in-laws couldn't escape the truth and left the office dejectedly. Soon after, James and his family left the house. The negotiation for compensation was settled by my brother-in-law for $70,000, considering the purchase of the house, the motive behind the marriage, and the mental and physical pain I endured. I really wanted to get more, but after consulting with the lawyer, we concluded that this amount was fair, my brother-in-law said apologetically, and I nodded in gratitude. Considering that the maximum amount for moral harassment is usually around $30,000, this was a significant achievement. For me, it was nothing but gratitude. Fortunately, the house was returned to my possession within a few days. The furniture and appliances were also moved under my brother-in-law's supervision, and everything was successfully recovered. Currently, the house is being used as a rental property. It's too big for me, and since it has good location and barrier-free features, it seemed a waste not to use it. Following my brother-in-law's advice, I started renting it out. Susan is busy with her days working to pay off the debt, following my brother-in-law's decision. She works from morning till night, and my mother-in-law and James are in a similar situation. My father-in-law, unable to work due to his disability, contributes from his pension towards the debt repayment, and they seem to be leading a difficult life. I felt relieved that my brother-in-law is a trustworthy person. Years have passed since then, and I continue my work as a lawyer. Thanks to my brother-in-law, the monthly payments are going smoothly, and it's expected to be paid off by next year. Despite often contemplating ending my life amidst the hardships, I held on to the belief that my efforts would be rewarded someday. That belief has become reality, and I live each day with gratitude.